Oh, modern technology. What a thing it is that a boy from Norfolk, Virginia can grow up in surf and then also get across the state to the mountains and cover some college football. What a dream it was coming to you here live from Blacksburg, Virginia. A very busy Blacksburg, Virginia with all the new freshmen moving in here on August 20th, 2025. And yeah, an action-packed practice racing across the state today. So jumping right into things with the vibe of fall camp. This was sort of talking to Coach Fry. This was the week where it was the way they're sort of meshing into game week. He called it a bonus week as they prepare for South Carolina. We got out there on the practice field, and it was a little confusing for some guys when you go out there and they're still in their scout team uniform. So guys were in different uniforms. Both true freshmen, AJ Brand and Keldon Ryan, wearing number 16, obviously to imitate South Carolina's Lenora Sellers at quarterback, obviously giving them that scout team look. And yeah, I mean, you hear the overall camp mood of competitive, physical energy is up. Coaches are fine tuning the rotations and starting to shift towards that game prep mode. It's definitely been physical, hearing that it's gotten very chippy at times, but I mean, that's what you kind of wanted this camp. Now, I mean, they're sort of shifting out of that dog days of fall camp and moving into the more specific game install, but it definitely got chippy there at times. Just sort of what you hear when you're adjacent up here. But, that's what you want to hear in camp. You got a lot of new faces, but at the end of the day, you come back together and you grow closer for it. So that's sort of where they're at, trying to simulate that game week feeling of what's a Monday look like after game, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday walkthrough and sort of building on that as they get into South Carolina game week next week. Some notable quotes from Coach Fry talking about that depth chart. We'll jump right into that. With the depth chart buzz, we'll touch on some injury updates, fall camp standouts as we inch closer to week one. Talking about that depth chart, Pry on that backup quarterback battle said obviously Pop slightly ahead, but I think something he said was Rangel does something with his arm every practice that makes you say, wow. So obviously Pop Watson with all the increased reps last year and what he saw in game action when Kyron Drones went down, it was obviously super valuable. And then having the spring here with Philip Montgomery has been super, super valuable for Pop Watson to grow in that backup quarterback position battle. But Rangel, definitely he has some things about him. Texas high school football, he just finds a way to make some plays. But right now I'd say Pop has a slight edge, but Price said that's going to go pretty much all the way up to week one in that backup quarterback position. So definitely something to monitor. Obviously, neither of those guys are really scared of competition. Talking to both of them at media days and past media availabilities, neither one of them are going to run from competition. So it's kind of what you would expect right there behind Kyron Drones. We saw only routes on air today, didn't really able to take much away. Pop Watson was, I think, on pretty good timing today. Hit Tucker Holloway on a nice crossing route and a couple others. But like you said, can't really take too much away from that performance specifically. And I think, like I said, just circling back on that, I think it could go all the way up to week one and then moving into the running back room update. And we'll touch on injuries more in a little bit, but just depth chart wise specifically, obviously, biggest news of the day was that Terrion Stewart was not practicing and was in a walking boot as reported. So in that running back room, and as has been covered on vtscoop.com, pretty much since about mid-July, Marcellus Hawkins' stock rising, the Central Missouri transfer running back, has been flashing and popping in fall camp, and someone definitely to keep an eye on as we start rolling closer to South Carolina as that guy who could be starting right next to Kyron Drones on that first snap. I thought something that was really interesting talking to Marcellus Hawkins. We've done, I've got interviews I'll link in here dating back to when he first signed initially as a transfer and then through media days and other things, but something that he's definitely not afraid of. And coming from the Division II level, under recruited, played quarterback in high school, was really clear today. Said he loves competition. He's not afraid from it. But then also talked about in the room how they're all locked in and helping each other and how it's a really close-knit group also. So like I said, sort of with that quarterback battle, it's a rising tide lifts all ships. Obviously, you don't want to be looking at the guy next to you and be selfish, but they push you to be better. And I think Marcellus Hawkins has had a really dynamic camp, explosive, high energy, not afraid to pass block, not afraid to catch the ball out of the backfield, lower the shoulder, go between the tackles, bounce it outside. And like I think I touched on in the last live video, what a really great job of the recruiting staff, the staff that was here over the portal window of going out and finding this guy and it was his only visit to Virginia Tech, and then landing him because, I mean, looks like someone who's shaping up to be a really, really impact player for the Hokies this season. And Pry also was very complimentary of Hawkins today as well, said he brings it every day. And, that's what we've seen. Obviously, the clip of him going around in the hurdle went viral, but it's just someone who does all the little things right, and someone who's that all-around back, and people have been hearing that, but they've sort of had Stewart penciled in, and things obviously aren't trending the right way there, and we'll talk about that more, but definitely someone stock up to watch. Some other notes, I think the safety rotation on the depth chart, that top group's kind of been forming, as we talked about on VT Scoop. Quentin Reddish, Tyson Flowers, the Rice transfer, and then you have Christian Ellis, the transfer coming in from New Mexico. I feel like those guys staying healthy, that was a pretty solid top group if they go with that 3-high safety look that you've seen. Definitely something to watch there with that top group, and they sort of separated themselves a little bit. But we talked to Isaiah Cash today, the Sam Houston transfer, and he's super versatile. He's been working at safety, nickel, corner. Pride talked about how he's smart, he's experienced, and he elevates when the pads come on. So that's something that stands out and is really valuable depth there. He brings that veteran voice to a young room. You talk about Quentin Reddish. That's a guy's a true sophomore. You're bringing a guy like Sheldon Robinson. Even Tyson Flowers hasn't seen that much college football relatively to Isaiah Cash. So it's super valuable. But like I said, Quentin Reddish, Tyson Flowers have had really great fall camps and summers, and I would still tote them at the top of that safety room. And then Christian Ellis sort of as that third option, as that outside safety look. Another name that's popped all camp that we've talked about is Jordan Bass, still learning the position, but Price spoke very complimentary of him today, said he could use his red shirt if depth holds, maybe not. They're sort of having those tough conversations right now about how to utilize him back there. So that's definitely something to monitor. But Cash is sort of that Swiss Army knife guy who's going to try and scratch, claw, find his way into the rotation. I thought he had some really good insight on just the culture of Virginia Tech, how it stood out, and how he's adjusted so far. And then also another position group we'll touch on is that offensive line second team. We've talked about it a lot. That front five on the offensive line is set, obviously going from left to right. Left tackle, Johnny Garrett. Left guard, Lath Ganem. Center, Kyle Altuner. At right guard, you got Montavious Cunningham. And out at right tackle, Tomas Remack. But behind them, that second team is going to be a massive, massive, massive point of emphasis or storyline, because it's hard to keep those five guys healthy all year long, playing 60, 70 snaps a game, whatever it is, for 12 weeks in a row. And behind them, like I said, we're going to jump into injuries right after this, but Brody Meadows was someone who also didn't participate today in practice. Is sort of right behind them. And then Jaden Muskrat, they go out and they get that experienced offensive lineman from Auburn. Those are sort of the two guys outside of those five that have seen live bullets, seen college football, and you sort of know what you're getting with them. Pride brought up the guys behind them, Hans Hammer, and then the redshirt freshmen of Aiden Lynch, who I'm extremely high on. I think I even brought up in the last episode. Aiden Lynch, I think someone who is going to have a really high ceiling and has done a lot of really good things this camp. And I mean, obviously the way things are going, you can early probably project him into that lineup next year. If, like I said, there's so many variables with someone who I think's had a really good camp, has done all the things the right way, but it just takes time. And then Tommy Ricard and Lucas Austin as those other redshirt freshman guys still kind of working behind them. Probably said, like I said with Aiden Lynch, probably said it's a talented group, just not where those older guys are yet. And that's to be expected. You sort of come to expect that these guys show up on campus and they have to play immediately because just the way the world is. But, sometimes it just takes a couple years to build that depth, and they just haven't seen a lot of college football yet. But yeah, that is definitely a massive circle on the depth chart, is who's going to slot into that backup offensive line. And that's still remained to be seen. I'm not going to say too much on the linebackers because of what we saw at practice today. I didn't get too great of a look, but that's the other point on the depth chart that is going to be super, super interesting as we carry on closer to South Carolina, but also throughout the entire season, where you're going to have Caleb Woodson, and we'll talk about captains. Obviously, got his captaincy. Caleb Woodson's going to be playing there alongside who? Jaden Keller, Caleb Spencer, who's quietly having a great fall camp. And then you bring in the two transfers of Michael Short, who seems to be doing the right things, and Antoine Santiago. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how that shakes out, because all those guys can have an argument and are going to see snaps. It's just what's going to be that rotation, who stands out, who's going to pop, who's going to make Cephas not be able to take him off the field. The defensive line didn't get too many looks at that today, but that rotation sort of to build it out a little bit. Hearing some really good things about Elijah Fall. Just a really versatile piece coming out of Georgia Southern. Does a lot of things. Hearing some nice things about him. Definitely something to monitor. Same with James Jonkum. Obviously had a great spring game, but hearing good things about him as well along the defensive line. And then innately, like I keep saying it, but Kamari Copeland is someone who flying way under the radar on a national scale, but I'm willing to put my bet that a lot of people will know his name here this season. He's different. Just on the field, everything he does in the weight room, he's going to be a good player if he just stays healthy. So that's definitely something to watch along the defensive line. But then moving on into the injuries, like we touched on, got some good updates from Pry on the injuries from today. And as you see on the screen there, running back Terron Stewart did not practice today. List him as day-to-day. And, it's not trending good there. Obviously, last week, the media was told that he was in and out of practice. He was in, he was out for still in a walking boot, taking him day-to-day. But like I said, not trending the right direction if that's what you're hearing here a week before game week. Obviously, dealing with something on the left foot, ankle region, nagging. Not the greatest sign to hear, but at the same time, at the expense of it, you have Marcellus Hawkins, who's had a great camp and is also making strides. So something you don't want to hear when a lot of people, I think, penciled in Terry Stewart coming from Bowling Green as maybe that starter, but things could be trending the right direction. Maybe they're just holding him off, but things obviously, like you said, you want to have him out there and still rolling. A couple other guys, Kai Heath, dealing with a minor tweak, Price said. Obviously, you can see him there in the picture on the screen. He was out there fully dressed. He was kind of hanging his head like you see in the picture there. They were going through routes on air, and he was just walking down and back as they were going. He was dressed, but he wasn't running through any of the routes or going full speed with anything. So that's something to monitor because he's had a great camp, and Price said that in the press conference. If you catch that on the YouTube channel or on my X account, Price said he's had a great camp, and that was echoed through the view back to ACC kickoff interviews. A lot of people have been talking about Kai Heath and what he's brought to the table, but obviously his first play ever at Rutgers when he broke his wrist, and just things with the weight and just make sure you get this guy healthy has been the biggest thing going into a season. So it sounded like they're just pulling back the reins a little bit, but obviously you want that guy full go going into South Carolina. Chance Wiggins next at that wide receiver position. Pry said in the press conference after that his recovery has been way ahead of schedule. Do with that what you will, but it definitely sounds like he's going to be doubtful for at least week 1 and maybe beyond that. And that's a blow. I mean, that wide receiver room has definitely been taking some licks. Not listed here, but Cam Selden has been out there like last week, like we touched on. It looked like he was back full go today. Brody Adams has listed there. He was in the training room today. So you're really not having your full look of weapons at that wide receiver position, building chemistry and resolve and just getting all on the same page. So it's kept the offense a little bit out of sync, not really getting all on the same page. So getting a little banged up at that wide receiver position, allowing some guys like I think Tucker Holloway to maybe step up. Some other guys, Luke Stewie out there, Micah Matthews, Isaiah Spencer talking about the Jackson State transfer, Donovan Green. So it's definitely some things to monitor in that wide receiver room as everyone tries to get on the same page ahead of this game week. And then like we touched on with the backup offensive line, Brody Meadows still wasn't in practice. Pry doubled down and said he's in good shape, not really too worried about it. But last week said he'd expect to have him back for the next mini camp, and that was last Wednesday. So it's been a full week now and still no Brody Meadows rolling out there. So something to monitor because, like I said, that front five is pretty established, but you get past them and it looks kind of bleak on that depth chart. So some injuries definitely to monitor as we get closer to South Carolina. I wouldn't say get way too over your skis at this point. Like I said, we have game week next week. We'll talk to Pry on Tuesday and then also probably Wednesday at practice next week before the games. And I think then you'll have a pretty clear picture of Terry Stewart, Brody Meadows, where they're at health-wise, but not trending the right direction with either of those guys. When you're hearing it's just nicks and bruises and you expect them back out and they don't roll back out in that next mini camp. So it's definitely something. The biggest takeaway of the day from camp today was that. But moving right along, some quick hits and fun stuff. The quote of the day, we were walking out there and Coach Cheetah, the cornerbacks coach, Derek Jones, yelled to the Hawaii transfer cornerback, Caleb Brown, "You got hands like SpongeBob SquarePants." He dropped a rep at corner. And obviously he's still right in the mix at the cornerback rotation. If you want to talk about that, someone who's had a bunch of experience. We talked about him at Fan Day, and he talked about, just absolute journeyman going from Kennesaw State to JUCO, out to Hawaii, now to Virginia Tech. He's seen a lot of college football, hasn't played exactly a lot of college football, but he's seen a lot, built a lot. He's still right in the mix there. But I think someone quietly in that defensive back room who you're hearing a lot of chatter about now, especially here on August 20th as we're getting way closer to that first game date, Thomas Williams at corner. People can't say enough about his speed and what he's doing just and overall. Coverage skills, just everything he's been able to do. It sounds like he's really taking a big step. And that's mirrors what I heard this summer, like going in and getting extra work on the Monarch Jug Machine and just really attention to detail. And then playing alongside him, Dante Lovett. I've heard really, really positive reviews about both those guys. And then you still have the true freshman guys like JoJo Krim, hearing solid things about him. Christian Williams, I saw made a nice play on the ball today, but a lot to shake out there. But I really think Thomas Williams and Dante Lovett have asserted themselves nicely. And then Caleb Brown obviously adds a nice element. You have Isaiah Brown-Murray, the ECU transfer, who's going to find his way on the field. Is he going to be at nickel? Is he going to be at outside corner? But he's going to find his way on the field. He's really shown a lot of really nice things since arriving to campus. But outside of that, I thought that was funny. Hands like SpongeBob SquarePants. The captain selected, obviously, you had Woodson, Gosnell, John Love, and the others are blanking on me right now. But Pride talked about how it was the most competitive vote he'd had. The players and the staff voted. Aiden Green as well was in there. And the captains were picked for offense, defense, special teams. Said it was really player-led, and those guys separated themselves. And it was sort of like those guys had been in the program and waiting their turn. Obviously, Kyron Jones, too, on the captains that I forgot. But those guys have been waiting their turns and kind of patiently waiting. And then they jumped after it, and they made the most of their opportunity. And you saw the picture from the retreat they took out to Smith Mountain Lake, I believe, or Claytor Lake, excuse me, whichever one. But you saw the picture, and it's like those guys definitely stood out above the rest and led the team. So, like I said, was it the most competitive? Was it the best candidacy? Who knows? But it seems like this group has definitely become more vocal just based on everything you're hearing from Woodson and Green, and obviously Kyron taking that extra step as a leader. Some other just news and notes, like I said, Isaiah Cash talking about the family feel and transfer buy-in. He said, like, when I came here on my visit, it just felt like this is where I was supposed to be. Obviously, Pry told him to go and take other visits to make sure it felt right. But pretty much after the visit, he said he felt like it was home, and it matched everything his expectations was and more, which is good to hear even when you don't know who the defensive coordinator is going to be. So that's definitely something nice to hear in the recruiting process when you're going through, and it just lived up to the expectations of what you're getting sold. Here at the end, before we get into some questions and maybe some wrap-ups, some stock up, just to, like we said, wrap it up. Marcellus Hawkins definitely emerging. I think that's one of the biggest tidbits of today. Emerging stock up. Marcellus Hawkins as a potential week 1 starter at running back has done all the right things through summer and fall, stayed healthy, got a little banged up in the spring, but has stayed healthy. And I mean, just physically his frame, like, you don't want to draw comparisons. He's bigger than Bashaw, but just has a nice frame and can do a little bit of everything too, like Bashaw. So like I said, not drawing comparisons, but someone who definitely has the frame and body type to be a really dynamic player at this level. Isaiah Cash, where does he fit into that defense as a versatile depth chess piece? And really just that safety room in general, has a real depth and competition to it, much improved from last year. That's obviously why they go out in the transfer portal and bring in 4 safeties. They bring in Caleb Brown. They bring in Isaiah Brown-Murray because that was somewhere they felt like they were lacking. And now it's just in the next week to really put together where Cephas wants all those guys and how does he make the chess piece and the puzzle go together. And then lastly, just that backup quarterback battle that we'll watch all the way going into week 1. Pretty much Pop Watson versus Garrett Rangel. Obviously, it's a lot different than years past when Kyron Jones versus Grant Wells or whoever is going to be that starting quarterback, but it's the backup quarterback as seen last year is extremely important. So those are pretty much the main tidbits of today. We'll get to one or a couple other questions that were dropped in the chat. And this was left for me on X. Who do you see winning the running back 1 job based on camp? And like I just said, I'm at this point, I'm honestly straight up ready to go out and say healthy, unhealthy, whatever it is. I think Marcellus Hawkins has done what's needed to take that job and run with it going into the season. And it's nothing against Harry Stewart. Like, I think when he gets back healthy and rolling, he provides something very valuable to the offense. And that's why you go out and you recruit that guy. Elijah Brooks, I think, has a really, really great eye for what he's looking for and how to go recruit and, also develop talent. And that's no slight on Terry and Stewart. But at the same time, I think Marcellus Hawkins has come in with his head down. He brings an element to the offense, a very well-rounded all-around piece. And he's just worked and just hasn't let his foot off the gas and hasn't given the coaches a reason to take him off the field. So I think he's won that job. If I were to say right now, August 20th, 11 days or so until the game day, I think Marcellus Hawkins is going to be that guy standing next to Kyron Jones or behind him on that first snap in Atlanta. We'll see if we got anything more here in the YouTube chat, and then we'll wrap up. How is Coville doing? If he doesn't make the 2 deep, does the coaching staff try to redshirt him? That's a good question. Like I said, we just talked very extensively about all the safeties, and Sherrod Coville's name hadn't come up. It's definitely been a quiet camp from him behind all the other safeties like Flowers and Reddish, and even I think Sheldon Robinson has gotten more looks. It's definitely been quiet. He hasn't come in and been exactly the impact player that maybe the staff and others were expecting he could be. And you saw that sort of happen at Clemson as well. That's why Dabo and them, they weren't exactly too upset to see him walk. He was playing an in-between position last year, and it's just, like I think coming down in the box, man, he can strike and hit really hard. But at safety, you have to have some coverage skills, and I think that's where he might be lacking just overall in general compared to some of the other safeties. Now, like I said, in Steve-Giss's scheme, who really knows? Like I'm saying, like you could bring down a safety down in the box and utilize his skill set. And that's what Steve-Giss really wants to lean into, is utilizing everyone's skill set to the highest their ability. Coverage, I would say, is definitely not Sherrod Coval's top trait, but when he gets down in the box, and I mean, he's a really, really good thumper, can read gaps pretty well overall, but it's just a coverage aspect that I think he's been lacking in a little bit. And like I said, it's been a really quiet fall camp. So in that 2 deep, he'll probably fall somewhere in there. With the 3 safety looks, who knows, but he's definitely not in that top group right now and not really fighting there. But good question. It's going to be hard to keep Spencer off the field. I'm not sure if you're talking about Caleb Spencer or Isaiah Spencer, but I feel like that's also fair for both those guys. I think quietly in the spring, someone who had one of the best springs making a complete position change going from the star linebacker position to moving inside was Caleb Spencer. I remember just what he was doing in the spring, and also just at the pro day talking to a lot of these scouts, just looking at his frame and what he was able to do. Someone like that's someone to definitely circle in that linebacker room. Like I know you want to look at the transfers of Michael Short and Antoine Santiago, but like Caleb Spencer was a guy who really came on late at the end of the year. And I know he was playing a completely different position and moving inside's way different, but someone who reads gaps. He's not afraid to put his hat on the ball. And someone who's definitely, I think, to watch this year. He's going to be hard to keep off the fild. And like you said, yes, sir, that's him. But I'll talk about Isaiah Spencer too. Today, he was repping in that top group along with Donovan Green. And, that's someone else. Like you get so overlooked in that room when you talk about Keelan Adams, you talk about Aiden Green, all these faces, but it's like, you get a couple injuries with Chance Wiggins. You need that other outside threat. And Isaiah Spencer's been that guy. And I think both those guys have made it hard to keep off the field. Who stood out most among the freshmen? One more. Like I said, among the freshmen, I thought Luke Stewie had a nice day today. He put a ball on the ground and probably gave him a hard time, was saying, I'm going to tell your daddy, I'm going to send him that clip, because obviously Michael Stewie coming, former Virginia Tech Hokie, but I think he's had a nice camp. Cam Sparks, physically, I think he has a nice frame. Micah Matthews has looked good. Snook Peterkin. Now I'm just kind of listing guys, but I think overall, if I'm going to take my top freshman, I think Snook Peterkin at wide receiver has really turned some heads, heard some really good things about him. Just a competitor as a true freshman stepping in, not exactly where his body needs to be, coming in over the summer, still planning on playing basketball, but just a competitor, not scared of anyone who lines up across from him. I think Noah Chambers at linebacker, physically, what he's done on some reps. Now, maybe he's lost some ground here in fall, but that's what you would expect. You just want him to come in and play fast and hard and really unforgiving in fall. You're going to make mistakes, but he's just gone after it. Sheldon Robinson back at safety, and we just talked about all that safety depth, so it's made it a lot harder for him to show out, maybe specifically, but that's someone I think projecting-wise is really, really just on the right track, does all the right things, great technique, and it has great people around him in that room coaching him. So those are a couple of those names, but I think mainly Snook Peterkin at that true freshman spot, and then maybe a Cam Sparks physically just sneaking into special teams or something in that regard. But yeah, that was the show. Really, really appreciate the support, everyone. It's been a ton of fun starting this up. As we get closer to the year, I'm excited to add more new elements to this. Still a pretty rough product around the edges, but we get out of practice and I try and deliver you what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and just can't wait to keep this rolling and adding to the coverage. So appreciate you guys rocking with me. Make sure to keep the comments and questions rolling. We'll have another one of these on Friday after practice. But yeah, everyone have a great weekend. College football is right here. I mean, like I was so used to coming up to Blacksburg over the summer, and it's a completely different world when downtown and Washington Street and Beamer Way is pretty much unclogged. You can just rip on from home to the facility and back. But nope, the students are here. You can feel the aura of Lane Stadium about to be rocking. 11 days till we're down in Atlanta. So make sure to stay tuned into vtscoop.com. We're running a great countdown to cook-off special on all the VIP intel. Going to have a lot of really big recruiting scoops and news here coming in the next week. So definitely go check into that. Class of 2026, a couple of JUCO guys, definitely some new updates coming out. One actually about to drop on the site here soon in a little bit. So make sure to go jump over there and check it out. Appreciate everyone jumping in here. Yeah, have a great Wednesday afternoon, and we'll check back in with you Friday.